The immigration bill is now past its first major hurdle in the U.S. Senate. It passed the cloture vote yesterday by a large margin. Senator Kelly Ayotte of New Hampshire jumping on board with the Gang of Eight and moving the immigration bill forward was a major part of getting that passed yesterday. And so now it really seems to be the Gang of Eight and their allies in the Senate versus a very small but vocal and important group of senators on the Republican side trying to put a halt to what is being called immigration reform. Those senators, of course, you've heard of Rand Paul and you've heard of Ted Cruz, and the third member of that band of merry men is Senator Mike Lee from Utah. He's our guest right now. Senator Lee, you wrote an op-ed yesterday saying that the Gang of Eight bill on immigration is an immigration version of Obamacare. That's scary. Explain.
Well, what I mean by this is another 1,000-page bill that has lots of promises surrounding it, and many of those promises don't pan out, and others of the promises are offset by real dangers that lurk within the bill that should cause a lot of Americans concern, but don't, in part because the thing is so long that very few people, even people who are among the bill's most ardent supporters, have never read.
One of the people up on Capitol Hill who has sort of joined you in some ways is sort of surprising to me. Chuck Grassley, senator from Iowa, has gone on record as saying, you know what, this reminds me an awful lot of the promises that were made when we took on this issue back in 1986.
Yeah, that's right. Back in 1986, we granted amnesty to those who were here illegally. We were promised at the time that the border security problems and the visa modernization needs of America would be dealt with, and it's never really happened. And that's what happens when you go ahead and you legalize and grant citizenship to millions and millions of people based on their illegal status in the United States and say, we'll deal with these other issues later. They never really materialize. And so I think a better approach would be to take it step by step. Let's fix border security now. Let's modernize our visa system, which is antiquated, now. Once those things are implemented, we'll be in a good position to deal fairly with the needs of the 11 million who are here illegally right now.
Senator Mike Lee, you joined the Senate the same year your colleague from Florida, Marco Rubio, did, if I remember right. And Senator Rubio, being a part of the Gang of Eight, has spent the last few weeks really kind of echoing that. We need to fix the border security part of this bill. It's not going to pass unless we focus on border security. And then stunningly, just 2 days ago, he actually went on Spanish-speaking television and said the border security element will be done after what he's calling legalization, what other people are calling amnesty, is taken care of. Have you consulted with Senator Rubio? What is going on there? Why is he now seemingly abandoning the idea of putting border security first?
Yeah. Look, he and I are friends. We work together a lot on a lot of issues. We happen to have a rather significant disagreement in this area, and it's not one that we've been able to reconcile so far. I respect his efforts in this area, but I respectfully but forcefully disagree with the approach he's taking on this. This is a bad bill.
Can I just bear down on this one part of it, though, just for a second? Because he does refer to this as legalization, and I've heard many people call it amnesty. What is the difference in your mind between, is it just euphemisms at this point? Do you consider this to be an amnesty bill for those who are here illegally?
Yeah, look, amnesty means a lot of things to a lot of people. But if you define amnesty as anything that grants legal status and grants at least a very strong potential for citizenship to people who have entered this country illegally, then yeah, this is that.
All right, so
exactly that.
There are a lot of people on the Republican side of the equation right now who are saying, look, if the Republican Party is to remain a viable party, we have to do something about this issue. A lot of people think that the Republican Party can never really continue to be a power in this country unless they somehow deal with the problem that they have with Hispanics in this country. When you hear that and then you hear this all the time. When you hear those comments, what's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is they're exactly right in the sense that they're suggesting that we need to fix our broken immigration system. And they're right in the sense that we need to reach out to all voters of all backgrounds and make the case for why the conservative movement can benefit them and will. But that doesn't mean that any and every bill that comes along is good. And this bill isn't good. This bill won't solve the problem. It will make a lot of our problems worse. And that's where a lot of my colleagues have gotten it wrong, I think. They've gotten caught up in this fervor that says we have to do something. And because we have to do something, we have to take a bill like this one that will cause a lot of problems for the American people.
Now, you're raising objections, you're raising concerns, and clearly, these come from a disciplined part of what you truly believe. But what is your general overall sense about the chances that the Senate will pass a bill that eventually could find some kind of support over in the House of Representatives?
Well, at this point, this bill, or anything resembling what I think the Gang of Eight is likely to be able to support, anything that's likely to pass the Senate at this point is not likely to pass in the House.
So I just wanted to follow up on that. So the Senate passes a bill, and it's probably going to be DOA over in the House. The House is working on its own bill, and it's going to be DOA when it arrives in the Senate. So that means we're talking ultimately about this perhaps being resolved in a conference. It seems like to me the differences are pretty hard to sort of bring together in the way of a comprehensive bill that can then pass both houses.
Well, perhaps. We haven't yet seen the Senate deal with a smaller set of proposals like what I'm describing, like what I'm contemplating would come out of the House of Representatives. That's been my argument all along, is that I don't know anyone in either house or in either political party who is saying we don't need to deal with border security or we don't need to modernize our visa system. And I think members of both houses and both political parties would be hard-pressed to vote against something that dealt with just that. And so I think it remains to be seen that what could pass the House could not pass the Senate.
Senator Mike Lee, I'd love to get your comment on this. Our senator right here in Virginia, your colleague Tim Kaine from across the aisle, he delivered his speech yesterday in support of the immigration bill in Spanish. First time, as we know, first time a speech has been delivered in Spanish on the floor of the Senate. Did you hear it? Did you see it? What's your impression? And do you think this really helps the cause of immigration reform?
I heard the speech. I understood every word of it, and I think it's great when members can communicate in multiple languages, and I disagree with his conclusion that we ought to pass this bill. But I certainly admire both his ability and his willingness to do the work to communicate.
Well, so your admiration for his linguistics aside, I mean, is it appropriate in the United States Senate to be delivering a speech in Espanol?
Well, let me put it this way. I think that's a question that he's got to answer for himself. It's not my job to tell my colleagues what to say and what not to say in the United States Senate. But I will say this. There are those who are understandably concerned that about the idea of introducing another language into the legislative debate on the floor of our country's deliberative bodies, and they would prefer to see those go on in the language that our country has historically used. And I understand and respect that viewpoint.
All right, Senator Mike Lee from Utah. I think it is fair to say, though, that you believe that in any language, Senator Kaine was wrong for supporting the bill.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I do. I think this bill is not a good bill, and I think a lot of the people who have been supporting it haven't read it.
Thanks for joining us. Always good to have you, Senator Lee.